Hey, Sub-Furies. Part 2 of the theory on the Masked Man will be coming out later in the week, but Wonder Woman also just came out, and we need to talk about it. Caution, this will be a spoilers review. I will be talking about the twists, the characters, the story, and everything else. Alright, you're still here? Okay, on your head be it. Let's get started. Firstly, I would love to discuss Diana, Wonder Woman as the female lead heroine herself. You know, for a long time, there was kind of this belief that, like, female heroines wouldn't really work, but Wonder Woman totally just showed us the potential of female heroines in the superhero genre. I was really impressed with that. She was this great blend of someone who was, you know, protected and isolated, but had this kind of yearning to be this active player and do good in the world, really driving the story. Beyond that, they did one thing incredibly well that I think Marvel really struggles with, and that is with female heroines showing, not telling. Throughout the entire story we have this determined, onto it, badass female character who proves through her actions and not through her words that she is just as good as her male counterparts. There wasn't a single moment in the film where we had that awkward exchange of that main female character literally telling her male counterpart that she is just as good at fighting as he is. And nor was there any poorly executed metaphor of the female character taking down the male character that belittle her for being a woman as a symbol of taking down the patriarchy. We see those sort of scenes, especially in Marvel, so often, and honestly it's just lazy writing. Wonder Woman demonstrated scene after scene after scene that you can have a morally convicted, badass female heroine without needing to belittle the male characters around her. That in itself is admirable. They did female characters really well. Secondly, let's talk about something that the movie opens with that I don't think we've ever seen in a recent DC movie before. Color. Not just the navies and greys and blacks and silvers of the recent Man of Steel or even Suicide Squad movies. There's a real sense of life and wonder in the Wonder Woman movie. It's got greens and whites and vivid blues in the pseudo-Greek city-state of Themyscira. It's really revitalizing for me. But the color palette was also used really intuitively by the director, Patty Jenkins. And you know, this is throughout the movie, right from when Steve Trevor crashes into Themyscira. We see this sharp contrast between the dark and gloominess of the outside world of man with, you know, the World War I going on, versus the shining beacon of Wonder Woman's home. And taking that into the story as Wonder Woman goes into the world of man and fights on the front line in World War I in her costume of red and blue and gold, she becomes a literal beacon of light to those on the battlefield, symbolizing bringing that hope to that desolate place through the use of her costume. So yeah, I thought that was really well done. Thirdly, we need to talk about the fight scenes. So DC has kind of recently had a bit of a problem with how they do fight scenes, in my opinion, especially in Man of Steel, where one person would punch another person 100 miles away and they'd go crashing into a building and then they'd pounce on them, then there'd be a bit of yelling and then rinse and repeat. But Wonder Woman's combat was fluid and visually interesting, and also, unlike I think a lot of Superman's, grounded in reality. Superman is this like huge tank that can punch a man 600 miles away and then shoot him with laser beams out of his eyes. There's this largeness to Superman's combat, while Batman's is close combat, which is mostly defined by hearing the breaking of necks and bones, which, don't get me wrong, is pretty damn awesome. But Wonder Woman seems to have perfectly placed herself between these two extremes, a kind of middle point between that huge Superman-ness and small Batman-ness, which is also great because it further defines her place in the future Justice League movie by differentiating herself from Batman and Superman. Oh, and on a side note, I would just like to take a brief moment to talk about possibly the most awesome scene, Wonder Woman in the trenches. We saw it in the trailer and it's artistically done with a moving soundtrack, it's historically resonant, and seeing her taking the fire behind that shield, deflecting the bullets and charging across no man's land, it was thematically important without them needing to say it. She showed us her potential and just how awesome she could be by heading into that fray. Seriously, that scene was brilliantly done. Fourthly, let's talk about the story in the movie itself. I really loved that it was fundamentally the story from the Rebirth Wonder Woman comic, where Ares kind of comes back and tries to start the greatest war ever fought. But what was really interesting and well done was that the story was split into two veins. Two veins that also reflected the two main characters, Wonder Woman of Themyscira and Steve Trevor of British intelligence. On the one hand, we had Wonder Woman, daughter of Queen Apotala, trying to stop the Great War by defeating the god of war, Ares. And then on the other hand, we had Steve Trevor trying to end the Great War by defeating General Ludendorff and stopping him from releasing a gas that would kill millions. These parallel narratives of the supernatural and the reality of war were done fantastically. They integrated extremely well, and I was really impressed with how they executed it. It never came across as heavy-handed. And that brings me to my fifth topic, Ares. So this parallel between Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman really came to a head, to a climax when, spoilers, okay, Wonder Woman kills General Ludendorff, believing him to be Ares and that would stop the war, and it doesn't. Now, Steve and Diana have this kind of a little bit cheesy, and I feel like it could have been done a bit better, talk about how war isn't just caused by like a god of war pulling all the strings, but sometimes people just do bad stuff. And while it was a little bit cheesy, the realization for Diana was actually done pretty well, and it was quite profound and really humanizing for her, given that she came from this mystical world into the gritty reality of war, which I don't think she had really appreciated up until that point. But big ups to Gal Gadot, the actress playing Wonder Woman. Anyways, on to Ares, and by the way, spoilers once again, I think Ares was done pretty damn well. The fact that he turned out to be Remus Lupin rather than General Ludendorff was kind of a bit of a predictable twist, but I still liked it. It was still a pretty good twist. It kind of subverted those expectations of the German bad guys and the British good guys. But most importantly, something occurred to me when I saw him fighting Wonder Woman in the final act of the movie. He doesn't move. For most of the fight, Ares doesn't really move, and if he does, it's relatively slowly. The passive, reactive god of war Ares was really interesting to see, although admittedly nothing like the comics. It was a really interesting creative direction to take when, you know, we would usually associate a god of war with being aggressive and fast and forward with how they fight. But it did actually fit really well. It actually made, I think, the final fight scene kind of a bit more interesting. Then in the last part of her big boss fight, as Remus Lupin gets all of his health back for one last shot, he does put on some of that more traditional armor that we typically see in the comics. But that only really happened towards the end. Oh, of course, I do need to talk about a couple of the flaws. One thing I would have liked was for Ares not to be destroyed by some big bolt of energy and be left as a crater in the ground. Because the rest of the combat throughout the movie for Wonder Woman had been more personal or intimate. Wonder Woman would dart through people, blocking and dodging and deflecting bullets, and fighting with her sword and shield. There weren't godly powers or big flashes of magic at the heart of all the fighting, which once again I thought really fit for the World War I theme. Now, I understand the need for kind of a big finish for the final fight in a superhero movie, but when Remus Lupin revealed himself to be the villain, he spoke quietly and doesn't even move. Plus, taking him out with kind of a lightning bolt is sort of Zeus's thing, and yeah. I just wish perhaps that the godly powers and massive flashes of magic were maybe in the earlier part of the fight scene, and then it was resolved with kind of her in the more intimate, personal combat way we had seen her use throughout the rest of the movie with a sword and shield in hand. On top of that, the final line before she defeats him, "I believe in love." Yeah, that was just cheesy. I would have probably preferred something more along the lines of like, "I believe in mankind." But even then, I'm not sure it was wholly necessary. We could have seen that exploration of her character in perhaps less an overt way. But that's all from me, Subfuries. My question to you is, what did you think of the Wonder Woman movie? Let me know down in the comments below. In the meantime, feel free to follow me on Twitter, Wattpad, Facebook, send me stuff that you've made at the address, or email me at the links in the description below. Stay nerdy, Subfuries, and I'll see you in the future.